Hello and welcome everyone. So this is the final closing panel of Zine Mela, which has been going on all day. One of the most important things about DIY cultures and zine fairs is how we can educate people beyond institutions, national curriculums, and other forms of limited knowledge, and how we can redistribute knowledge. The people on the panel here, they've all in some way contributed to the lifeblood of active decolonial knowledge. To me, zine fairs aren't just about markets for creatives, they're also about creating new forms of connection, rethinking the order of the world, spontaneity, improvisation, the failures of like big party politics, and there's no better. One of my inspirations for my life is my very own radical auntie, Anne-Marie Wilson. So one of the people who've been the greatest in terms of sort of solidarity has been South Asian solidarity through a very across many generations, and publishing and independent publishing was also part of the people. Anne-Marie is also a prolific writer, a very humble person.
Not that humble.
Okay. There's one of her books, Finding a Voice, which pioneered South Asian feminist activism in Britain. And also part of the practice in South Asia was this indie magazine, which you can called Inquilab, which the entire archive of it is online on the South Asian website. And why should people look at this today? What was it about?
So yes, thank you so much, Hamja, primarily for organizing this amazing Zine Fest. I've never been to a Zine Fest before, so it's all new to me. But I can feel how vibrant it is and how many different sort of ideas are floating around here. So yes, I'm honored to be part of this, and I just want to say something quite briefly about Inquilab, which is what I was asked to talk about. Well, South Asian Solidarity Group was set up in the mid-80s, and then around the beginning of the 90s, we decided that we needed a magazine. And I think what I need to say right from the start is that we were an unfunded organization, and we still are. And this meant that we didn't have to tell people, well, no, this isn't within our remit, so we can't do this or that or the other. We were quite free to do exactly what we wanted. And that, I think, also attracted a lot of really original and sincere people to us. And if you just look at the first issue of Inquilab, which we were incredibly proud of, we just couldn't believe that we'd actually produced this. The photograph is by Sunil Jana, who was a very famous photographer of Indian struggle. He took amazing pictures of the Bengal famine and also of the independence struggle generally. And he lived in London. He was quite badly off, but he really embraced us, and he said, of course you can use my pictures. And so he gave us his picture, and then we also had, why it's interesting today is that there was so much then about how racist the Labour Party was. So this is something which we have. So history, in a sense, is important because you have to learn certain things which have never gone away. Labour is a part of capitalism. Labour is a party of colonialism. Labour has always been racist. So there's no way we can say that, the Labour Party is okay. Yesterday I went to a meeting and somebody was saying, that's the mainstream, we've got to be there. This is complete and utter nonsense. Also here, for example, there's a story by Tariq Mahmood, who was one of the Bradford 12. I don't know if you've heard of that case, where the people in 1981 fought against the racists, and they were charged with terrorism offences, the first terrorism offences in this country of that sort. So Tariq wrote a beautiful story about unemployment and racism, which is also in here. And then we had stuff on Sri Lanka, we had stuff on the revolutionary struggle in India, And then we also had, I wrote a review here of the exhibition called The Other Story, which I was actually a bit nervous about because it was so critical of the great names who had produced this exhibition. And when we used to sell it, we never. So how did we fund it? I think that's important to say that. I remember going to WOMAD and selling food there, and it's incredible how much money you can make like that. And there was no way we were going to get funding or grants or anything else. We didn't want it, right? We also had stuff on caste. I should just say briefly something about South Asia Solidarity Group. Basically, it's an anti-imperialist, anti-racist group which tries to analyze capitalism, which sees this particular era, the neoliberal era, as very much rooted in corporate power, and therefore we have to look at what's happening now in that context. And if you look at what was happening in the 80s or even in the early 90s, the corporates did not have quite as much power. For example, I wrote in another context about the so-called virginity test, which people have probably heard about, and I could hold the minister in charge to account because the government ran these detention centers. Now, the detention centers are run by corporates who rape and abuse women in the women's prisons, really. So that way we've seen this change, but we've kept up with it. And South Asia Solidarity Group is currently involved in a very important campaign against the JCB bulldozers. JCB is run by a man called Anthony Bamford, who is a lord. He's a big donor to the Tory party and also now increasingly a donor to Reform. He is incredibly racist in himself. And the area where he lives, it's very extremely well off. So when people talk about Reform being just about disaffected working class people, it's not true. It's about money. And part of this estate, by the way, is the estate of Sir Oswald Mosley, who you must have heard of. So we can see how the corporates link up to fascism. And of course, in India, we have the same thing where you have Adani, the big corporate, which is, destroying the climate. It's involved in Gaza. It's sending weapons to Israel and manufacturing them. And it's also shoring up the government of Narendra Modi, the fascist Hindu supremacist government. So in the last, from 2014 on, we've been totally occupied with trying to resist the fascism of the Modi government, which comes in many forms, including in Britain. So, we have a lot of that here. I could go on and on, but maybe I've taken too much time.
Thank you. I can listen to you. South Asia Solidarity is part of a coalition called South Asians for Palestine. Some of their zines are on the table there. And you can also support the JCB campaign, which sort of ties together Palestine, Kashmir, also the war against indigenous people and Muslims within. This is actually a zine you may not notice, but it's shaped like both a kite and a paper aeroplane. And it's tying together the timeline of Kashmir and Palestine, and also upstairs in the Mayfield room there's also South Asian Solidarity for Palestine, and the poster, which is designed by the same artist, also ties the two together. Part of the sort of conscience of the nation and international liberty has been the student encampments, and Tasneem here has released a exciting new publication which brings together all the current encampments, and she's going to talk to you about it now.
Share on the screen. Thank you. I'm going to have to share this on the screen because it's still in the process of being printed, but it'll be out in the next month. So if anyone would like to pre-order, we have a website called untilpalestineisfree.org. .cargo.site, and you'll also find it on the RCA Palestine Society website to pre-order. Okay, so as I was introduced, I am Tasneem from the RCA Palestine Society. I worked on this publication with my comrade Zissel, who was unfortunately unable to come, but we worked on it during the end of our time during our masters at the RCA. While we were running the RCA Palestine Society, we were approached by Iniva at the Stewart Hall Library, and they had a exhibition called the Global Resiliences Exhibition that was running just this October until March, and they wanted us to come and do some workshops and that surrounded the theme of global resiliences, and the exhibition, which was basically bringing together archives of zines that spoke about struggle and political struggle, whether it's feminist struggles or anti-colonial struggles. It was just a collection of these zines, and we were brought in to kind of make our own version of a zine that spoke about a political moment that was a political moment that happened more recently, because the zines that they were showing were between 2010 and 2020. So we decided our contribution was going to be a publication, and this publication was to come out of workshops that we hosted at the Stewart Hall Library. We wanted the focus of it to be the encampments and the student organizing that re-emerged out of the genocide when it started on October 7th. And we wanted to kind of document and collect reflections from student organizers who were organizing during that period of 2023 to 2024. They're obviously still organizing, but this was the moment that we chose to focus on. And we facilitated workshops and discussions with the student organizers who were involved in what we called the student intifada of our time. We see students, and we saw students use Gaza and the Palestinian resistance as their compass to hold UK higher institutions accountable for their complicity in the Zionist settler colonial project and in the broader imperialist infrastructure that enables genocide. And we wanted to make sure that the publication was shaped entirely by their experiences and by their voices. So the aim of the publication itself was to offer a living archive and a practical toolkit shaped by these experiences and reflections. Our motivation was to take stock of this past year of student organizing and to reflect on what we learned through the struggle, with the aim of providing a resource that can support and politicize future student organizers in a commitment to anti-Zionism and anti-imperialism. And it was something that we thought we would have found useful when we first started organizing at the PALSOC. So the publication itself, as you can see, has it been moving?
No.
Okay, let me just refresh. Okay, so this is the cover. And it should run through the different parts of the publication, some excerpts that we have on the website. But it brings together different writings, artworks, conversations with student groups, artists and organizers. You'll find some guides on some chants, some definitions that are important to when you first start organizing, like important ones to think about and to know about. There's a lot of images, reflections from the UCL occupation that happened in 2023. Conversations with different student organizers about various topics, encampments, and building collective building collective movements in the face of repression. This was done by the LSE. This was a conversation that we had with LSE students from the LSE Liberated Zone. And then this was a quilt that was made in the UCL library. And this is some excerpts from one of our workshops that we did. And we end the publication with some resources as well. The main themes that are kind of covered within the publication are organizing skills, coalition building, encampments, occupations, welfare, repression, and art as resistance. If I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about student organizing in general, but I don't know how much time I have. Okay. I think the UK student organising scene has a much longer history of organising and occupying to confront Zionism on their campuses, way before like US encampments started for Palestine, and it's they've been at the forefront of the Palestine movement in the UK. And since the beginning of the genocide in Gaza in 2023, the student movement has been a critical force in the global struggle for Palestine. Students who are historically at the forefront of anti-imperialist movements like Vietnam, South Africa, and Iraq rose again in October to with discipline, clarity, and courage. It activated many of us, transforming our anger at university complicity and state repression into action. And when Zissel and I were organising at the RCA PALSOC, there was a lot of trial and error. We were learning by doing, and we weren't sure where to start, but we were agitated by this moment, and we wanted to like confront our university. And I think each student that is on campus like has the same agitation, and they look to organising to as an avenue to confront Zionism on their campuses, and hopefully this publication like is a way of like consolidating all of these lessons so that when future organisers can have that same agitation, they have like a resource kind of to look to. And yeah, I think I'll stop there. But yeah, that's it.
So, to a current student, there's a exhibition that's all around the building and upstairs and behind the reading rooms upstairs to one of the artists is Anya, whose painting is over there, which is part of a trilogy, and there's a special made artist book zine in relation to it. So it's also engaging with these narratives of colonial history, and also like the current sort of the plunder and dispossession, and how to develop it into artwork. But go ahead.
Thank you for having me. Basically, my paintings, they're a series, and what I was thinking about, like the seed that planted it all, is the concept of art and painting as like an alternative way of storytelling. And this way it sort of like transcends language. My grandma can look at this and read it, and I can communicate with her through painting instead. And this series, the Kohinoor series, was inspired by a book by William Dalrymple, and he uses the Kohinoor as like a metaphor for like empire, and traces it throughout history, and that's kind of like what I'm trying to do through these paintings. I think the work is kind of self-explanatory, so if you guys have a chance, read the zine, check it out. Yeah.
And it's part of the trilogy, so the second part of the painting's upstairs, the big phoenix, and there's a third part as well. What's the third part about?
So that's going to be like in the Kohinoor in a contemporary setting, because I've done 3. This is Mughal times, and then the second is like later on, and then the third will be like, I'm not sure yet, but it's going to be the crown jewels, and I think that it's a really insane concept to me that to like go and see the Kohinoor now, you have to pay £28 to like go to Tower Bridge, and I think there's a lot of thoughts that I think I'm trying to develop about that. Yeah.
One of the most exciting student occupations was in Goldsmiths, where you're currently a student.
Yeah.
How was that?
So that was during my first year is when everything started. So I was like very much a baby, but we camped a couple times, and it was like a very exciting, very intense atmosphere. And I have a lot of respect for the MA students and the third years that organised it all. Yeah.
Cool. A person who's been really key to my education of British colonial history and Bengali and Bangladesh has been Muhammadullah, who's like, if you like, there's so many hundreds of people who sort of learned from his self-organising. So you had Brick Lane Circle, which is outside there. You also get these Spice War books, which he's given for free. And like everything from walks around London to comedy to bring in the best like historians, but to like the ends or like has been done by him. But you're going to start talking about the Spice Wars.
First of all, to say he's been our inspiration. See what happened. Growing up in this country was quite bad, right? For me, as someone from Bangladesh background, I saw fellow Bangladeshis and myself not understanding things, but we were always being defined by other people who didn't have the tools and the knowledge to actually, and the confidence to define ourselves. So, as a result of us exploring this, we used to discuss in cafes and so on, and so we decided, why don't we do something about it? So a group of friends, we created the Brick Lane Circle to try and promote knowledge, learning, and we want to teach people the sources of knowledge, where to get the knowledge and how to critically engage. So I don't want to go too much in detail, it will take too much time. But over the years, right, we organized more than 200 seminar sessions. That's from 2007 until 2020 or something, right? And about 80 of them are on YouTube. We still got a lot more to upload. It's taking kind of a long time. But from around 2007, our focus shifted mainly to history, right? And this was our first project. The name was called Battle of Plassey Young People's Project, but the book's name became Plassey's Legacy. 2007 was 250th anniversary, of the Battle of Plassey when the British took over Bengal. So we thought it's a good opportunity to engage people. So we applied for funding, hired a lot of people some money, and we engaged some young people, to look into, because you see, a lot of people, Bangladesh people living in the East End, it was from this area, the city of London, East End, and the docks and everything, where East India Company ruled, the whole of India through Calcutta as their kind of capital. But we were blissfully unaware, of all the areas around where we were living, working, the links he had in all those like colonial things, right? Now, while we were doing this project, some people said, what about us? Because we're not interested in academic style, we want to do something creative. A few years later, but even before this one, I also worked with some other organization. I developed a project where we looked at East India Company shipping, how it evolved, the technology and navigation over 250 years, just to make sense how it was possible for a small nation like this to control, right? See how their power kind of increased, right? Yeah? So again, the method that we used is recruit people from the community. It's not written by academics or professionals, but we had a lot of support, The World British Library, people like Nick Robbins, Georgie, and many other people, National Maritime Museum, Museum of London Docklands, and many people also mentored, supported, right? So we kind of pioneered a method where we get a lot of people, help them, train them, and then they produce and we write books, so they get ownership, right? So when we were doing this one, they wanted something creative, so we came up with this fiction writing project. And this project, I'm just going to tell you a couple of things. I don't want to take too long, right? When we publicized this project, I couldn't believe it, the amount of interest. I had emails from New Zealand, they're telling me their history, right? Links with India, 1840s, some military, whatever. I had a young white woman want to talk to me. So I met her in Idea Store Cafe. She says she's the descendant of an illegitimate daughter of Robert Clive's friend, right? And then during our project launch, it was so packed, right? And so this lady from National Maritime Museum giving presentation, telling us what resources they have and how they can help with the project. And during the presentation, there was a picture. She had a lot of pictures. One particular picture was the Indian shipbuilder, Bombay. I forgot his name, right? He's quite a big, chubbish, very big man. And this white man from the back, he got up. He said, "He's my grandfather," right? So right. So people are saying there's lots of white people who have Indian ancestry living in this country. The last one about this one, I had an email from an academic from Kent University. She retired, but she was still marking PhD. And she told me that she's the descendant of Mir Jafar. I don't know if you know Mir Jafar. Have you heard of Mir Jafar? He's the guy who sold Bengal to Robert Clive through a contract, right? He was a military general. He not only didn't follow the order, but he actually misled the Bengal Nawab and helped Robert win. This white woman from academics, she's saying she's descendant of Mir Jafar. That was very strange, right? And I was kind of surprised. I met her, we talked. Basically what she said, because when Mir Jafar betrayed, they had agreement, with the British, and the British kind of gave them some privilege, and they passed down generation. But by around 1850s, the British were taking away some of the privileges. So one of the Nawab came to London to get redress. He was here for a few years, and he fell in love with a young English girl, right? Yeah? And so had 4 children, and she descended one of them. So this really interesting stories, right? Okay. And the last one, I don't think too long. Brickland Circle produced 4 books, right? Yeah? Printed books. And Brickland Circle produced 4 printed books, but we have some PDF books as well, right? But I also worked with some other organizations locally, and some books are over there. I only brought here Brickland Circle book. I'm going to tell you a little bit about this one. This is called East India Company Spice War Story. Now, we all heard about spice war, why the European people went, to get spices and so on. But unless you really go into it, you really don't fully understand, what happened, right? What was the story about, right? So this project, we thought, will focus on the first 25 years of East India Company. Because English East India Company left England, London, Woolwich, February 1601, right? And by 1624, the Dutch actually won the spice wars against the British, against the English. There's no Britain that time, because the Dutch managed to send more money, more resources, more people, and they were more focused. They wanted to get hold of the Spice Island and monopolize. There's cloves and nutmeg. Pepper was grown all over the place, so nobody could monopolize. And pepper growing areas were controlled by powerful sultans. But the cloves and the nutmeg were grown in small island with small power. So they couldn't really resist the Dutch aggressive attempt to take over, right? I don't want to go too much into it. But by 1619, the Dutch took over present-day Jakarta, smashed up, burned the city. Then they started building a new city, they call it Batavia. 2 years later, they conquered the Nutmeg Islands, Banda Nutmeg Islands, and then also the Clove Island came under their control. So they controlled all the Spice Island. And the 17th century flourishing of Dutch art and Dutch commerce and everything was possible from the monopoly of nutmeg and cloves that they established, right? They only lost the monopoly when the British went and took those Spice Islands from the Dutch during the Napoleonic War. But I don't want to go into details. Okay, about this project, right? So this is fiction writing project, and we recruited people, from different communities, and we wanted them to focus on the first 25 years of to look at the Spice Wars, because after around 1625, the Spice Wars was finished. Dutch had already won, right? So in order to do this project well, I actually went to all the main places in Indonesia, present-day Indonesia, like Banten, Aceh, the Nutmeg Islands. If you want to go to Banda Island, you have to go to Ambon, and about 22 hours by ship. Or you can get plane to Elsie, it'll be scary, right? So I didn't take that one. So I went there, I actually familiarized that, when I read in the journals about different places where ships came and they engaged with this, that, and the other. So I went to those places, and I came back, I shared, the images, photos, and videos. And we also had a conference, fiction writing conference, Heritage Fiction Writing Conference, where we linked up some people from the Banda Island. Banda Island is near Papua, by the way, it's very far, through Zoom to talk to our people that in the conference we had at the National Maritime Museum, so they could directly, talk to find out about the massacre, about the impact on them. But you see what happened after the Dutch killed off most of the people or caused their deaths around 1621. They needed manpower to work on the nutmeg gardens, right? So in those areas there were slaves available, but they were like in tens or fives, right? But they had a large amount of slaves that they could get from Bengal and near Pulicat area, the Coromandel coast of India. So from 1624, the Dutch started to buy, slaves. They didn't raid them, but others did, but they bought from them. Bengal alone, from 1624 to until 1665, nearly every year, Dutch took hundreds of slaves, right? So, people who joined, they looked at all kinds of things that they inspired them. But what I did, I wanted to still tell the story of Bengali slavery. So I wrote a historical fiction myself. I'm not a fiction writer. So if you read my one, you might laugh, but you'll get some history, right, in there. So basically what I did, I focused on a girl, who got kidnapped, who was made into a slave. But there were slave boys, girls, and children taken, right, But I wanted to focus on a girl because also the Dutch, they used to keep concubines as well, in the plantations. They used to plant the concubines, and sometimes they gave really serious punishment. And this in the record, you can see the tearing up in the cutting faces of girls and things like that, right? To punish them so they don't transgress. So anyway, so we had a very beautiful end to the project. I don't know if Hamza came, but my time is up. So. We still got some books. It's free. You can take them.
We've got these free fan-on zines for everyone attending, made by Rahul was one of the people involved in that, and also the books are outside.
I also got a box.
Yeah, there's a whole box of Spice Wars, so if you're interested in the history of British colonialism that used to be a company. I think we'll just open it straight to the audience here. And there are educators here. So if anyone has any experiences, questions, contributions, please go ahead.
Question for you. Thank you so much for your presentation. Very brief and short, but it's been a contestation that I've experienced over my time. I'm late to academia. And I ended up in Trinity College, Dublin, 2017. And there I met a Marxist editor. And he was eulogising about the labour movement and how anti-racist it was. I say eulogising because he was talking about it from the 70s and 60s. I found it offensive because I have lived experience from that time. I'm a child of the 70s. And I could see how racist the labour movement was in that time, in Leicester, for example. But he was so willing to overlook that and minimise it and mitigate it. And then I later found that I'm at Warwick University, and again there are similar things going on with academics talking about the labour movement and it being anti-racist, but in fact I really don't think it was. So I wonder if you have any more to share.
I totally agree with that. I mean, and this is, as you say, it's still going on. There's a kind of reluctance. It's having lived here for so many years and been to so many meetings about race, there's this idea which a lot of white people have, is that to be accused of being a racist is worse than experiencing racism, And so that goes very deep. We've seen it in the women's movement, we've seen it on the left. But I think, maybe we can be hopeful that things would get better now with Palestine and so on. There has been a broader coalition possible among younger people, certainly not among the old lot who are the same. You see this kind of racism, particularly in the women's movement, where it was always a struggle, which is why we had to set up our own organizations. I mean, black organizations were set up primarily because of the racism of the left. And not only just racism, but their refusal to understand the importance of colonialism, of imperialism. And in a way, it still goes on up to a point, I mean, look at somebody like William Dalrymple, who is loved by so many now because he's taken a stand on Palestine. He's got a dreadful approach to India. He's published this book at this point saying how great Hindu culture was. I mean, okay, it was, but why now? Why are you publishing it now? He set up the Jaipur Literary Festival, which is funded by big corporates who are close to Modi. So, this is interesting how the liberals in this country, more liberals really than the actual left, but also the left, function. And I think that's, that's a very important point that you raised.
Just because you were mentioning about the racism of the women's movement, I wondered if you could say anything about Awaz and who was involved and what it did. And also, I'm really curious, who's publishing the Palestine book, and what's the experience of working with the publisher?
So it was initially going to be published by Ineva.
Wow.
But, yeah.
He used to work at Ineva.
Oh, really? But we decided for the sake of timelines and the urgency of releasing the book in this moment, that we would self-publish, and then if a publisher would like to pick it up for a second edition, because it's an ongoing archive, obviously, this trying to document and reflect on a movement to progress it is something that is not just in this publication, but it's kind of it's self-published at the moment, just to answer the question. Yeah,
well, the late 70s, we felt this very strongly because that's when the women's movement was also quite strong. And I remember going to meetings and being told that, racism wasn't a women's issue, so you can't talk about racism if you're a feminist, right? So there was, we felt a lot of anger about this and eventually decided to set up our own organization. Not in a sense in order to be separate, we're not separatists as such, but we felt that we needed to get together to have something where we could bring our issues and we could become stronger as a result. So Awaz was involved in a whole lot of different struggles. I mean, whether it was struggles at work, which we were deeply involved with.
What did Awaz stand for?
Awaz simply means voice, which is usually used for revolution or something like that, one of those. We, for example, we worked with women in sweatshops, and then we also found out that they were having a lot of miscarriages. And then we got somebody to examine them, and a doctor, and And then we discovered that it was their conditions of work, like there was no gloves, no proper ventilation. And so we actually did something about it. We campaigned and we changed things. We held the strike and all of that. So that's just one example. We were also involved with the virginity test. We organized a massive demonstration and a sit-in in the Customs Hall of Heathrow. We worked with the Brixton Black Women's Group and also the Indian Workers Association. But it was like, there weren't a very large number of us, and most people were very young. And it was, we were like on tenterhooks. Will anyone come to our demo? And then loads and loads of people came. It was just incredible, So yeah, those are some of the things we did. We also set up the first South Asian Women's Refuge for women facing violence.
Three quick points. The first is, Amrit, I don't know whether the audience knows, but when we talk about the virginity test, it was Merlin Rees, who was the Labour Home Secretary, and the Labour government of 74 to 79 introduced this virginity test for Asian women, claiming that they were not virgins, right? Coming across bogus marriage, fake marriages. That was the kind of principal argument. And
sorry, just to interrupt.
Yeah, of course, please do.
The thing is, they floated this idea that if someone was, the first thing is you can't check if someone is a virgin. That's the number one. It's pure sexual abuse. You can't examine somebody and tell they're a virgin. But their view was that if somebody was found to be a virgin, then they couldn't be coming here as a wife. And if somebody was found to be not a virgin, then they wouldn't be coming here as a fiancé because, patriarchy, you lot, you are so patriarchal. So, this was the approach. And it was awful, really. I mean, I remember I was the first person as a journalist, to discover that detention center, and this young woman would come, she'd just been married and she was still in her bridal clothes, and she told me what had happened to her. So, and women have died, in the late 70s, women actually died in the immigration halls because they were in labor pains and nobody would believe them. And I remember trying to get that story published in The Guardian, and eventually they did a tiny, small bit somewhere.
And I think we're at that same juncture again now, right? Yeah, with Yvette Cooper is the Home Secretary.
Totally.
Yeah, and we're obviously what is termed as the boat people, or the refugees, the attacks, the pogroms on the asylum hotels, and obviously they're at this moment taking place. We've seen this over the last week or so. So I think when it comes to the question of education, I think it's not a question of a done deal in that sense, and we have to come back to that in that kind of format. And so some of us here are involved in higher education, and we have to come back to that in two ways. One is that we have to fight against the authorities within the universities, but also even amongst our own kind of fellow tutors, we have to attempt to do that again. And Palestine is a classic example. We've been foisted around the IHRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Day Alliance, where we're accused of anti-Semitism, even though we're probably the best fighters against anti-Semitism going. So that's the other contestation, that we cannot relax, and those moments that have taken place in the past are central to what we need to do now as well. In terms of our memory is an important component, part of the resistance and the fight that needs to take place here. Otherwise, we'll be dowered in the context which is taking place in there. And the final thing is this, and it is important that we produce publications, we produce documentation, and it does include videos if we can get the thing going, and also a whole number of other processes that are taking place, because without that, they will devour us in whatever kind of format it is. The argument came, what happened in other countries will not happen in Britain again, that old same record being drawn in. It only did not happen because we seriously resisted at that time, and we also had to build unity in that kind of different forms. And I think at the moment there is some hope that new formation, political organizations are coming in. I don't know which way it will go. However, there are some moments where we have to seize at this particular time. If we don't do that, then we'll at this moment, we can conflict what's happening in America, what's happening in Germany, what's happening in France, in other places, could be here as well. I think in some moments it is happening here. Yeah.
I think in many ways things are worse now than ever before, to be honest. And there is no movement. I mean, there is, in a sense, there's a movement in terms of Palestine, which is like a huge possible movement, but it doesn't have a very clear politics, at least in my opinion. I'm sorry if I'm saying something wrong. That's the opinion I have, is that people tend to, this is a situation where, the horrors of what's happening in Gaza are being live streamed into our innermost corners of our minds. But I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, this is imperialism, And we didn't see it like this, but there was slavery. There was a famine, so many famines in India. Our bodies are still, we're still affected by those famines, We tend to get diabetes, we tend to get high blood pressure. It's all linked to having gone through famines in your earlier generations. So, we don't have that clear analysis of where we go from here, It can't just be, I personally, I think what Palestine Action has done is wonderful, And they're very brave people. But once again, it becomes like one group, a narrowness to it, And there has to be something broader which everyone can engage with and learn from. And in that sense, I think history is important. We made a lot of mistakes. We did some good things. And I think people need to learn from that objectively and analyze it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you to the whole panel for their insights and contributions and knowledges. And they'll be around if anyone wants to join their movements and take things further. This was the first ever Zine Mela festival. It's the first time I ever did it. It's the first Zine fair I've done for 8 years since DIY Cultures. So who would like to see a second Zine Mela? So the whole exhibition and the archive, this is my collection from over 30 years, is going to be here till the 14th of August. So come here, hang out, make zines, build better futures, build collectives, support the Palestine student encampment. So this is going to be the final hour of the festival. A lot of the zine makers, such as Nazra here, is fundraising for Palestine with their zines, and also Mantic of the Mantis as well are also fundraising, and the JCB movement I think is a really important campaign because it actually connects us, like all the various oppressions in South Asia and house demolitions and the wider movement, the student encampments, and connects us, so do support that too. And yeah, thank you. So I hope you enjoy your last hour. Please spend your last hour supporting all the creatives upstairs, and if you've been there already, please please have a look at this collection, which has been amassed from all around the world, from Australia to the slums of Mumbai. Thank you for attending. There's a hashtag Zine Mela 2025, so please send me all your photographs, hope to see you again at next year's Zine Mela. And next year you're going to have a zine collective, you're going to speak on the panel, and our movements will be stronger.